Okay, so we were looking at Romans chapter 11, and Paul, in continuing to teach us how God sees things, or how God operates behind the scenes, this idea of the Jewish community or the Jewish nation during the time of Paul, it was heartbreaking for him to see that not all the Jews are believers. So heartbreaking. For those of you who have maybe family members, maybe friends, maybe even relatives, they see that you're a believer in Jesus, but they're not following or believing in Jesus like you. And it could be heartbreaking, especially if they go further away from God and they think you're a crazy person for believing in Jesus, right? Paul's heart is broken. He's feeling so much sorrow over that. But God is giving him scriptures to comfort him. And one of the scripture verses that comforted him is that verse that says, excuse me, I am the only one left, with the prophet Elijah saying, I'm the only one left, and they're trying to kill me. Oh boy, I'm sorry. I'm the only one left and they're trying to kill me. And he's praying to God about that. And what was God's answer to him? Right? Let's say out of 1 million people, they've killed the prophets. I'm the only one left. And now they're trying to kill me, the last prophet. You know? God says, I have reserved for myself. I'm reading verse 4, 11:4. I have reserved for myself 7,000 who have not bowed the knee to Baal. See, there's still people, a few, a remnant, but there's still a few who are like you, who believe like you. And that's what God's answer was to Elijah. And I can see Paul identifying with Elijah because he's a prophet of God, you know, an apostle who has the gift of prophecy, speaking forth God's word. And you know that they were trying to kill Paul. You guys are aware of that? If you're not, I will give you the scripture verse. Are you guys aware that they wanted to kill Paul?
No, please, Pastor. I need it.
Okay. It's found in the book of Acts. And in the book of Acts, there were these Jewish, I guess they were there. These were Jewish people who made a vow. Okay. And their vow was to make sure they kill Paul because of what Paul was doing, which was teaching people about the gospel of Jesus Christ. So they made a vow to kill Paul. And their vow was, we're not going to eat until we kill him. What kind of vow is that, right? That's a pretty serious vow. We're not going to eat until we kill Paul. Now, my job now is to find it. Let's see. Here's a verse in chapter 18. I'm still looking for it, but you get an idea. When Gallo was proconsul of Achaia, the Jews made a united attack on Paul and brought him into court. This man, they charged, is persuading the people to worship God in ways contrary to the law. That's chapter 18, verse 12 and 13. I'm still looking. It says, let's see.
I saw one, Pastor, but is it Acts 23?
It could be.
I've got Acts
I know you're a
21
good
too.
researcher.
I got Acts 9, 23 to 25.
Okay, let's start with what did you say,
Baby Catherine.
baby Catherine? What was that?
It's Acts 23:12.
Okay, let me read that. Oh, yeah. In fact, the heading of my Bible says the plot to kill Paul. The next morning, the Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. It's one thing to say Paul is, America's most wanted, right? We really want him dead or alive, dead. But for them to make a vow, I vow that I will not eat or drink until I kill this man. Now that's committed, right? That is very committed. I'm not going to eat or drink until I kill Paul. See, that's what Paul was dealing with. Yeah, that's the verse. That's the one I was talking about.
Good.
Yeah, see?
So they starved to death?
Obviously, I encourage you to read the whole thing.
Yeah, Daphne, right.
I want you to read the whole thing, but okay, Daphne, what was your thought?
I said, so what? They starved to death?
Nothing is ever mentioned of what happened to them.
They didn't catch Paul, did they?
Or kill him, yeah.
They didn't kill him, so
let's start with that. They never killed him.
So they must have starved.
Paul was under Roman control at that point. Roman, they arrested him. And so, and they obviously took Paul and said, we're going to send you to the jail in Rome. You're going to be under, my understanding is house arrest until, you go to trial, and then we'll eventually execute you. So that's where Paul died, in Rome. Okay? Questions about whether they succeeded? No, they didn't succeed. Whatever happened to them? I don't know. Anybody can say, I vow I'll never eat or
They
drink.
died of starvation.
That could be. Scripture is silent on that one. Okay?
Yes, sir.
I just want you to get the feel of what Paul was going through. This is a big deal for a Jew to become a believer in Jesus or a Christian.
Yes, and fight for it like that.
What's that?
And fight for it like that. Risking his life.
He did. He knew what he was getting himself into, but
Exactly.
because Jesus changed his life. Remember, Paul was involved in killing, participating in the murder of Stephen, the first martyr.
Yeah.
Basically, there were the Jewish leaders who wanted to kill Stephen. This is their Jewish act against somebody who was persuading people to not follow the law of God, basically, or to believe in Jesus.
Right.
It was a threat to their religion. And so they were saying, we're going to kill him. And Paul said, go ahead. I'll hold on to your jackets. I'll go ahead and keep them here,
Right.
and watch them. I'll keep watching them until you kill him. And they succeeded in stoning him to death. Did you finish killing him? Yes. Here's your jackets. I made sure nobody took them.
Wow.
That's Paul.
Quite a story. Yeah.
Right. And then, you know, if you know a little, you got to read it in the book of Acts, but it's good to talk about it, because after that, he went to the leaders of the religion, and he said to the leaders of his religion, he said to them, give me authorization to arrest these people and imprison them, and we'll put them on trial, and eventually, if they're guilty, we'll put them to death. You see that?
Yes.
That was Paul. He tried to destroy the church of Jesus Christ until he was blinded by the light, right? Blinded by the
Basically, yeah.
light. See? And so that's
There
when
was.
that's when God changed his heart, changed his life. And then he now says, I'm going to live for you and I'm ready to die for you. See? But it's heartbreaking. You just got to grab hold of the, you know, the fact that his heart is broken, that his people, his family, his loved ones, you know, whether they're, you know, indirect or direct, they're not believers. What do you do with that? He goes with his knowledge of the scriptures and he uses these verses. Okay. What are the verses he uses?
Blinded by the light.
No, that's the song. The verses that he used is this thing that's in verse, let me read verse 7. 11:7. What then? What Israel sought so earnestly, it did not obtain. Now, what does that mean? What they sought so earnestly. What did Israel seek so earnestly, sincerely? What were they seeking? And yet they didn't get it. Does anybody know what they were seeking in regards to their religion? What's that?
They wanted Jesus to come to be the Messiah, to be came to free them.
No, actually.
No, wasn't it for
Because of their religion.
yeah, for the Jews to thrive and not have Jesus as the king.
God's
Yeah, so-
favor.
Yeah, they wanted
God's favor, yeah.
to have, to put it simply, they wanted to have right standing with God.
Yeah.
So the idea is, I want to be in right standing with God. Why? Because I love God. And I was taught, according to my Jewish, you know, religion, that to be in right standing with God, I need to observe the laws of God. And in their mind, they're probably thinking, I have observed the laws of God. Just like the rich young ruler who went to Jesus, I have followed these rules since birth, right? Since I was a young child. But the truth is, they follow these laws. They think they've obeyed them. But deep down inside, just like that rich young ruler, he doesn't really know how to get to heaven. He doesn't know how to inherit eternal life. And Paul knows that. And everybody knows that, because there's something in your heart that tells you you're not quite right with God. But they think they are, because they're observing the laws. So what they sought, which is right standing with God, so earnestly, what did it say about them? They did not obtain it. Read it with me, guys. Chapter 11,
Okay.
verse 7. Instead of 7:11,
Real thought. So
11:7. Who wants
they
to read
did not
that?
obtain.
Who wants to read that? Andrea, did you want to read it?
Okay, 7.
Yeah, 11:7.
What then? What the people of Israel sought so earnestly, they did not obtain. The elect among them did. The elect among them did, but
Okay.
the others were hardened.
See,
As
did you
it
guys?
is written.
Yeah, that's all you got to go. That's where you got to see it. See, they did not obtain it, but the elect did. See, the elect. So we're having to look at the elect. So let's do a whiteboard illustration, guys. Princess and Manny, let me assign you some co-hosting duties. Let's see. Okay. Now, you know, the challenges we have with the whiteboard, but, you know, I think it's worth it to overlook the challenges because you're learning God's ways. And sometimes having a whiteboard illustration helps. So what are we looking at? We're looking at, first of all, let's acknowledge God in this picture. Okay. And then there's two groups of people now, right? Okay. So one group of people come on. Come on. One group of people, Israel. They know more about the laws of God than we can ever know. You know, it's part of their history, Israel. And then there is what we call, based on this reading, who is the other group?
Jews for Jesus.
Yeah.
The
But for the
Jews.
sake of staying consistent with the text, who are they?
Israel,
The Jews.
Starts with the letter E. In my translation, anyway.
Hmm.
Does anybody know?
Oh my goodness.
It's read verse 7.
earnestly,
No, read verse 7.
No.
Elect.
Elect.
There you go. Very good.
And what does it mean? Other translations might have, instead of elect, they might have
The chosen one.
chosen. Yeah, right? Chosen by God, right?
Mhm.
So you have a group of people. One is Israel, what Paul is referring to, his fellow Israelites, who are unbelievers. The other ones is also his fellow Israelites, but they're chosen. They're elected. See?
Mhm.
Do you see these two groups? Just like what we were watching yesterday in the video?
Yes.
Okay. Israel, what's the characteristic? They sought what? Righteousness.
Okay.
They sought to be right standing with God. Right? And in their seeking to be in right standing with God, how were they going about it? By
Fireworks.
Following
By
the
the-
law.
by the law, by works, by the
Mhm.
by their religion. Which all of you who said works, law, right? Yeah. See? They sought right standing by their religion, by the law, by the works of the law. Everybody agree?
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes.
That's what we know about the Israel Paul is referring to. They're the ones who wanted to kill him. Remember that. But the elect, right? They're very few, right? But because they have been they have been chosen, or God elected them, refers to them as elect, what do they get? They obtain it, right?
In righteousness.
They obtain right standing with God. That's what Paul has been teaching throughout the book of Romans. Right? They obtained right standing. And how did they obtain right standing?
By works.
No.
By
We're talking
believing
about the
in
elect.
Jesus, by
Huh?
believing in Jesus Christ.
By faith.
By
Faith
faith.
in Jesus Christ.
By faith.
Yeah.
Just like their forefather Abraham, right?
Oh, by faith. Yeah.
Abraham believed God, which is he put his faith in God, and he was made right before God. So in God, looking at these two, this is the one that God accepts.
The few.
Right?
The chosen, the few, the elect.
In one.
Elite.
Yeah. See? And Paul has to process that, right? You know, Paul has to process the fact that, you know, God is revealing that. He's revealing that to Paul because he uses the story of Elijah. That based on God's calling or God's call, he chose these people to be in right standing with him, not by their own religion, but by their faith in Jesus Christ. Do you understand God's ways now? Say yes, so I can go on.
Yes.
Yes.
If you say
Yes.
no, I'll be glad to, let's talk about it.
Yes, Pastor.
But I will move ahead now. Okay?
Moving on up.
Okay. The others, it says, but the elect did, which means they obtained it. And then if you read 7 further, the others were hardened. Okay? Now he's going to focus on talking about these people, right? Come on. My whiteboard is causing me to pause. Okay. He's talking about these people, right? And what's the characteristic?
Hardened.
They're hardened. What does that mean, they're hardened?
They reject Jesus.
Reject.
No.
They don't believe.
Is that how you spell hardened?
They did
Okay.
not listen.
So this idea of being hardened, right? We are familiar with the phrase, if you hear God's voice, don't harden your heart. So this idea of being hardened, right? They're just not able to accept the message of Jesus's love for them and that Jesus is the Messiah who gave his life for them. Their hearts are so hardened that they can't accept Jesus. No way. No way will I accept Jesus. And that's what you're dealing with when you saw those Jews who said, we're never going to believe in Jesus. Okay? Because God hardened them. Their hearts were hardened. And so, you see how God works? This is how God works, man. You know, you can say, well, they hardened their hearts. Well, God also hardened their hearts. You know, that's a mystery, right? I hardened my heart, but God hardened my heart. Okay? They're hardened. And then as it is written, so continuing with verse 8, it says God gave them what? What did God give them?
Grace.
The spirit.
No,
of
read,
stupor.
please.
Spirit of
God
stupor.
closed their eyes so
You
they
got to read verse 8, people. What did God give them?
Blindness.
It's just
A spirit of stupor, eyes that could not see, ears that could not hear to this very day.
Okay. So the first line, God gave them a spirit of stupor. What's the spirit of stupor?
Stupidity.
It's almost like the spirit of stupid, right?
Right.
Stupor. So he made these Jews, the context is Jews, right? Obviously, we can take a principle there and apply it to Gentile unbelievers. But verse 8, read verse 8 with me. God gave them a spirit of stupor. Let me read to you from my multi-translation. And this is how it's expanded. God hath given them the spirit of slumber. The spirit of slumber. God gave them a spirit of stupor. God has thrown them into a state of spiritual insensibility. God has given them over to an attitude of insensibility. God brought upon them a numbness of spirit. God has numbed their senses. God has given them a deadness of mind. You see what God is doing? I thought they're being like that because they're just, stubborn people. Well, yeah, they are, but God also is involved in this. And if you think God is not involved in it, well, read verse 8. God is involved in giving them this spirit of stupor, all that stuff, right? Are you guys still with me?
Mhm. Yes.
Okay, so God gave them the spirit of stupor, eyes so that they could not see. So now God has blinded them, right?
Yeah.
Eyes can't see. What does that mean? They can't see.
They need
blind.
cataract.
Huh? Does that mean physically?
Yeah.
Literally,
Is-
Pastor.
What's that?
Spiritually.
Spiritually. They can't see what spiritually? They can't see Jesus
That's right.
Right.
as being God's sacrifice for their sins. They just can't see that. Why? Because God, you could say God gave them eyes that can't see that, as if God blinded them. I'm just gonna, ears, they should not hear.
Yeah.
I'm
No,
reading it
hearing.
here in my multi-translation. Eyes that they should not see and ears that they should not hear unto this day. That they should not hear unto this very day. Eyes that are not to see and ears that are not to hear. And it is so to this very day. With eyes that cannot see, ears that cannot hear, that has lasted down to this day. He gave them blind eyes and deaf ears. And so it is still. It's interesting that my translation does not include the part about having deaf ears, but other translation has that. Okay. You guys,
Pastor,
are you guys still with me?
Yes.
I have
Yes.
NLT.
Now, this is what's going on with the Israel non-believers, right? Okay, so who has their hand up? Manny, and then I heard Ophelia. Go ahead, Manny.
Yeah, we know that this is spiritual blockage. Can it also be a physical blockage that they really can't see God and hear Him?
I think it's spiritual because this is a spiritual matter.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with that part, but could it also be?
Well, I've seen people who are blind that believe in Jesus,
Yeah.
and I've never met somebody who's deaf who believes in Jesus because I've never met, I never had that kind of a relationship. But a person who's deaf can still believe in Jesus because they can know about Jesus by by
Hearing.
reading about him, or somebody being able to sign language. I don't know. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm sure there are some blind people that believes in Jesus.
Yeah. Now, what is Jesus able to do when he was here on earth? He healed those who were blind. He gave them the ability to see.
Right.
This is on the physical level, but the focus is spiritual. So if you have family members who are blind spiritually and deaf spiritually, well, what did people do? They asked Jesus to heal them. Heal my son, he's blind. Heal my daughter, she's deaf. She's deaf and blind. Jesus, please heal them. So you can always pray for them. But the context we're dealing with is Paul using the knowledge of his scriptures to explain why there is a group of Jews, Israel, maybe a large majority of Israel, who are hardened towards the gospel and had a spirit of stupor, and eyes can't see, ears can't hear. And Paul is saying God did it to them. See, God did it to them. I can't say God didn't do it to them, because it says right here, God gave them this. He did this to them. Now we live in time, right? And because we live in time, we know that they can always change. God can always give them grace, even up to their hour of death. But for now, they're hardened. They have this spirit of stupor. Their eyes can't see and their ears can't hear. Okay?
Okay.
So they have eyes so that they could not see, and ears so that they could not hear. Oh, I do have it in my translation to this very day. Okay? So that's what Paul is using, right? And obviously, if you guys want to find that in the Old Testament, you can find it. If you have a Bible like mine, you'll find a cross-reference for it. Okay? And if you guys are interested in finding the cross-reference, it's in Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 14. And if somebody would like to look that up and read it, it's Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 14. Okay? So that means, I'm not going to look it up for the sake of time. So somebody please look it up. But that tells you it goes all the way back to Moses. Okay? This, you could say, prophecy, right? So this prophecy that there are going to be people in the nation of Israel who are going to be like this towards God. And God already mentions it. Okay? So this, did anybody find it?
What is it? 30 what?
30 verse 14.
14?
Yes. Did I say it differently? Read
No,
it for
it
us.
says-
30, 14.
On
Okay.
the contrary,
Go
the
ahead.
word is very near to you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may follow it.
That's what?
That's what it says. You said Deuteronomy 30,
Oh,
14?
no.
14.
Mistake. Try Deuteronomy 29:4.
Okay. 29:4.
Yeah.
And it says, yet to this day, the Lord has not given you a heart to know, nor eyes to see, nor ears to hear.
Okay. So you got that reference. Okay.
Yes.
Deuteronomy.
Deuteronomy,
And who wrote Deuteronomy, people?
David.
Moses?
Moses.
It's Moses, right?
Yeah.
Deuteronomy.
Right.
Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Okay.
Muchas gracias.
And then you can also look up Isaiah 29:10. Does anybody want to look up Isaiah 29:10?
Yeah.
Isaiah 29:10.
Yeah.
See, this is Paul's knowledge of the scriptures, and God is giving this to his mind to process it in
And
sorting
it's-
out how to deal with this, how to, see it from God's
Yes.
point of view in dealing with the fact that Israel is not believing in Jesus.
And it says, for the Lord has poured over you a spirit of deep sleep. He has shut your eyes, the prophets, and he has covered your heads, the seers.
And there you go. See? So he's taken a principle from Deuteronomy. He's taken a principle. So Deuteronomy is Moses. And then he's taken a principle from Isaiah the prophet. And so Paul is not surprised now, or he's not confused by the fact that not all Israel are believers. So it's pretty consistent, right? With God's ways, or God showing us this is the way it is. Okay? So you got Moses, you got Isaiah, you got Moses, and then the next one is what? Remember, this is Paul's knowledge. The next one he's going to go to is
David.
David.
David, yeah.
So now David is involved in talking about same kind of people. Okay? And so read verse 9.
Likewise, David's, I'll read it, Pastor, in NLP.
Okay.
9, okay. Likewise, David said, let their beautiful, bountiful table become a snare.
Okay, stop. So David says their table, or their bountiful table. So we're talking about a table is where they eat, have feasts, have celebrations, maybe over the table, dinner table. Well, may it be a trap, a snare. They celebrate Jewish feasts. May it be a snare to them. I did come across somebody, I think, a church father in history who refers to the table as tablets of the law, as if to say, may their tablets of the law be a snare or a trap to them. But the other alternative is the table of feasting, the Jewish feasts. May that be a snare, thinking that if we observe the Jewish festivals, the Jewish feast, that's going to save us. That's going to put us in right standing with God. No, it's a trap. It's a snare for you because it keeps you from believing in Jesus. Okay? And then the next thing, go ahead.
Let their blessing cause them to stumble.
Okay,
And
so
let them get what they deserve.
So your translation says blessing.
Yeah. Let their blessing cause them to stumble.
Let them stumble over it.
And
Right.
let them get what they deserve.
Yeah. See, so this is what David is saying. Okay, so the table where you have feasting, you have blessing, may they stumble. Okay, because they're not believing in Jesus. As a result, it's causing them to keep depending on their table of blessing, and it's keeping them from believing in Jesus. It's keeping them dependent on observing the Jewish feast and festivals and blessings according to the Jewish law, but instead it's a stumbling block for them. Okay? It says a stumbling block and a retribution for them. What does that mean, a retribution? What's a retribution, guys? My translation says that. What does your translation say? Read it one more time, Ophelia.
Let their blessing cause them to stumble, and let them get what they deserve.
Okay, so now retribution is them getting what they deserve. See, this is a Jewish thing. You guys, you have to understand, this is all a Jewish thing. What do they deserve? Well, what the Bible teaches about the law, okay, it says that every violation and disobedience must receive its just punishment. You guys remember that in the book of Hebrews, chapter 2? Every violation and disobedience must receive its just punishment. So what do they deserve for disobeying and violating the law?
Punishment.
Just punishment. And that's where Paul is using this by saying, even David is saying, may they get what they deserve, because they're not obeying the gospel of Jesus Christ, and nobody can obey the law 100%. Therefore, they're guilty of breaking the law. Even if you break one, you break them all.
Yeah, the 630.
You break one, you break them all, is what James says. So they deserve to be punished. So they deserve punishment. See? And this is how Paul is processing this, you know. So this is how Paul is processing these unbelievers who, remember, their hearts are hardened. God hardened their hearts. God gave them a spirit of stupor. God blinded their eyes, gave them ears that they can't hear. God made them think that their table of blessing is for, you know, is a way to please God. And yet it's a stumbling block and a snare to them, which gets them to be so dependent on the laws of God, the feasts of God, that they don't realize when they break the laws of God, they deserve to be punished. They think they're perfect. And what is God saying? No, you're not. You're guilty of sin. See? And this is David now who mentions this. So God is putting them in their place by telling them, right? You're seeking to be in right standing with God. You think it's by your religion that you'll be in right standing with God. You sought right standing with God, but you never get to obtain it. The way to obtain it, as Paul has taught throughout the book of Romans, the only way you could obtain it is by being chosen. And when you're chosen, you will put your faith in Jesus. And that proves you have been chosen when you put your faith in Jesus. What proves you aren't chosen? By not putting your faith in Jesus. But again, we deal with time, and you can change. You can go from being an unbeliever in Jesus to believing in Jesus like Paul, right? Because Paul is a Jew, as well as many others who have come to put their faith in Jesus. And Paul is now understanding that he was chosen, he was elected. And that's how come he put his faith in Jesus. He changed. Okay? So that's as far as we've gotten up to this point, guys. And verse 10 continues it by saying, may their eyes be darkened, which is what David is repeating, right? David is repeating about them. May their eyes be dark. Verse 10, 11:10, may their eyes be darkened so they cannot see, and their backs be bent forever. So regarding them, as far as David is concerned, their eyes are darkened, which is another way of saying they're blinded. And David, again, takes on the principle, their backs bent forever. Now, for their backs to be bent forever, what is it communicating? Basically, it's communicating a burden, or they're continuing to carry a heavy burden.
Yes.
And they're like burdened with the law, burdened with guilt. Their backs are bent because there's such a heavy burden. And David is saying that about these unbelievers. Or he's saying that about the enemies of God, because if you're an unbeliever, you're an enemy of God. See? And which then says, you deserve the punishment. So that's as far as we've gotten with with chapter 11. And now you're able to process it with acknowledging the fact that, you're dealing with a God who's so great that it goes against your human understanding that God does this to people. He hardens people's hearts. And yet, with you and I, he chose you. Is this consistent with something Paul mentioned earlier in chapter 9? It sure is, because go to chapter 9, which will reinforce how consistent this is. In chapter 9, somebody read verse 15, please.
I can't, Pastor.
Okay, go ahead and read chapter 9, verse 15.
For he says to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I have mercy. I will have compassion on whom I have compassion.
Read verse 16.
It does not therefore depend on human desire or effort, but on God's mercy.
There it is. See? That's where I get the attitude. God does whatever he wants. God can do whatever he wants. And just be glad God accepts you. God has chosen you. And just be glad you're in that state of being chosen and elected by God. And you are the recipient of God's mercy. Just be glad you're that person. Because you're not the other person anymore. Or maybe you used to be, but not anymore. Okay? And on that note, we're done. Who would like to close us in prayer?